The following is a production of KYNE TV in cooperation with UNO Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and informational program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome to the Milo Bale Student Center at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. This is the last show we're doing for the year, so I decided to pull a bunch of people together that I thought were kind of neat and talk about some of the year's events, but we don't have everybody like all of one kind of people. I'll introduce them to you right now and you can kind of see what I mean. Brian LeBeau is Dr. Brian LeBeau. He is head of the Department of History at Creighton University, also heads up the Center for Religious and Societal Studies, or is it my close?
Study of religion and society.
Okay. Is
Close
it religion
enough.
in or religion and?
And society.
Okay. Okay. I should know these things. James Johnson, professor of history, head of the Department of
Political
History.
Science.
Political Science, sorry, at UNO. And I should know, I took American government from him at UNO. You can see how much I learned it. Also, Holly Murphy Barstow is with us. She is Vice President of Financial Advisor for Norwest Investment Services. And we want to thank you. And I wanted a little bit of diversity, but still in the same realm of universe, to talk about some of the happenings this year. And we're going to kind of take turns throwing some of these things out. The big debate at the end of every year, when we always read the top 10 stories that the news media decides on, is people call up and go, I never would have picked that. And this is just a bunch of stuff, not necessarily in order of importance. And so I think the thing that comes to mind first, which to many seems frivolous, to others seems certainly interesting, are the deaths of Princess Diana and Mother Teresa, which sort of were joined because of their knowledge of one another and certainly the proximity of deaths. How did you, as someone that...
I found it fascinating, largely because they came so close together and to see the different responses. I think to me it was more interesting to see the popular response to the death of Diana than even the details of the death itself, how people could respond to the princess, the storybook reaction that came up in that context. And then what I think was unfortunate was almost the shadow effect of Mother Teresa. It was sort of, oh yes, and she died as well. And I think the press tried to be fair and even-handed certainly, but certainly I don't think the popular response was the same. The hearts of the people weren't there, and that's unfortunate.
It had a life of its own.
It certainly did.
As opposed to just a historical piece of information. And
Right.
I mean, certainly this isn't a political issue for a political scientist, but...
Well, unless you want to talk about the monarchy, but...
which we can do.
Sure. But I think that it does talk to a bit about the public psyche and the kinds of things that resonate with the public, and the kind of glamour that the Queen had, or the Princess rather had. I think indicates the kind of star quality that's involved at the political level these days, which means that some people make it to the top who may not have the depths, although not to disparage her at all, but there's
well, let's compare to a Margaret Thatcher, let's say, and just in terms of
exactly.
Of depth. And it was political in England, certainly the whole royal tribe is political, and yet whether we should even have even have the royals or whatever. So that sort of resurrected that.
Yeah, and it caused the royals to have to rethink how they presented themselves publicly, because there was a great deal of negative feeling about the coldness, it seems as though that they approached that death. But people are the kind of people they are. You can't change the individual nature.
Well, we'll see if they...
Tony Blair a fair amount of star power that he didn't have before, because he was perceived to be in control and in command. And does that mean the Prime Minister now carries even more weight perhaps than the royals? Are they truly just old musty figureheads, and was she the best shot and now she's gone? I think probably.
Well, they are old musty figureheads.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
And they have been for quite a while.
Tony Blair was middle-aged musty figurehead.
Right.
Yeah. But it certainly was, for professional observers, which you all are in your own fields, was something to observe.
Yeah.
Although it's a blip in history, if that?
Well, I think that's a real question, is how, how much shelf life is this going to have? I mean, people talk about dramatic changes in the monarchy, and so that may very well happen, but it may also just simply be relegated very quickly to a footnote. It's the emotion. Once the emotion passes, I'm not so sure of the substance of this loss. So we'll
Will
see.
it buy a decade or two for,
I don't think
for
so.
the royals?
Well, yeah. Although it could become the British correlate to the Kennedy assassination. The young person torn away in this case her prime, and I think that it could have a fairly long-lasting impact on British culture.
Well, certainly the people that were the age that we were when Kennedy died will carry that beyond perhaps just the popular appeal of Diana or the royals.
A certain
would have had.
mythology, can
Right.
get created on the basis of that kind of thing.
Oh, there's some wild theories on the internet. I just
Oh, yeah.
can't believe. I mean, you read
Yeah.
those and you think, who can truly believe this?
I
mean,
wanna
if
know
you're a
who-
conspiracy theorist, boy, do they have a good one.
I want to know who
constructed
the
for
guy
her.
in the Fiat is.
Right.
Well, there are a lot of guys we wonder about this year, and I look at some of them, and there was a guy in a big stadium this year that sort of captured some attention. Brian, you were going to talk about issue of religion and
Well, the
actually,
Promise
actually
Keepers, yeah.
everything that's sort of attached to that right now in our society.
Yeah, I think it's part of a larger question, phenomenon, I think that's interesting, which is this perception of increased spirituality, if not religiosity, in the American people. And there's some evidence that I think there's some of that. Perhaps it's tied also to the end of the century, the end of the millennium that we're facing. At the same time, it's not entirely clear when you really look at it that this is happening. 60% of the people roughly have always believed, since polls have been taken, that the American religion's in decline, and yet by most measures it's not. 50 years ago, 95% of the people in America believed in God. Now 96% of the people believe in God. So by many measures, there has not been the decline that most people have predicted. On the other hand, there have been substantial changes, and I think there has been a certain individualization of spirituality that I think is reflected in the decline of mainstream denominations and so on. And I think that has also come to bear upon people's need to reach out in a spiritual sense. And that's where I think the Promise Keepers come in and offer people an interdenominational, non-denominational approach to expressing their religion. So I think this is an important event, although it might be long term, and I think it reflects a need on the part of the people.
This whole religious thing. I mean, as a political science student, Jim, the whole religious right, their power, and seeing what kind of staying power they have, and religion is big business.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's huge. I
certainly,
mean, look
yeah,
at the
right.
angel stores that are around
Yeah.
town. I mean, commerce locally. There's the religion of the self-help group, and go to your bookstore and see how much shelf space goes to self-help books.
right.
And that
go-
is kind of a new
Go
religion.
to Amazon Books on the
Yeah,
web.
on the web and see what. Yeah, you couldn't get
4,000.
through it.
That's
You
right.
could not get through the titles, and I think that's sort of, from our perspective, it's sort of a business of religion, and it's not maybe your local church anymore. It's probably let's religion to each other. How
Yeah.
do we self-help?
Right,
and
Right.
looking for that, and I think there's commerce there clearly. And all religion in some form is commerce, but clearly it's probably more mainstream and more down at the mall than it has been. Go to your angel store, go to your bookstore, go to your self-help group.
But I
But I
remember.
think also that it does have that political impact that the whole notion in the United States of separation of church and state, I think, in effect led to a situation where people like the Promise Keepers felt that they were being, in effect, pushed out of politics, that their values were being not only ignored but were being denigrated, and so it's a kind of a rebirth of the very real religious roots of the politics of the United States, because our politics have always had a lot of religion in
Well,
them.
we certainly had the Irish Catholics and
Well, way before then, yeah.
yeah.
But certainly,
well, and then,
but
and
that,
then
right.
yeah. Well, when we first came to this country,
Yeah.
the Puritans and the Puritan ethic
Right.
and Protestant ethic. But what I find interesting now is things like, well, I'm a Christian, I'm not a Catholic. I mean, when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I couldn't have fathomed
Right.
statements like that.
Yeah, well, I think what we're seeing there, very interesting, not just in the context that you placed it, but there has not been a dramatic shift in people's, at least announced affiliation with various denominations, and that they still consider themselves, 87% of Americans still consider themselves Christians per se, but they're reluctant to agree, to admit that they agree with the tenets of a particular faith. They'll say, I'm Catholic, but I don't really believe in X, Y, and Z, which are very often fundamental to being Catholic. But yet they
Like
still associate.
the divinity of Christ or something.
Right.
Well, birth control and some of
That's
those
right.
things come into
right.
play there.
Yeah.
Well, and then we have the impact. I mean, it used to be, basically a Christian nation,
Right.
so-called, with it, this Jewish segment, and now a growing Muslim
Big.
impact
Big.
that I think in the last few years we've really seen.
And other seems to be even more melting potish. I mean, sort of again, this spirituality where it's maybe not, it's free floating. It's not really even, there's just this whole angel cult. I mean, I keep referring to that because that seems to be sort of a sub-populace where that, we don't really need God anymore. We've got angels kind of thing, which is interesting. And there does seem to be that.
But we also seem to be getting this flavor of fundamentalism in everything that's coming, whether it's
Right.
the Christian fundamental, even the Jewish groups you're seeing, where it used to be they were getting more reformed, and now you're seeing more of that. And certainly I think the Muslim groups in the United States and the world are, there's this whole weight to the fundamentalists.
Because when you get, religion had been throughout the world in the United States moving towards kind of a blurring of doctrine. And of course, what that does is leave out those people who have a very strong commitment. And then after a point, they in effect say, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to, this is what a Catholic is. This is what a Muslim is. This is what a Jew is. And
And this
these
is
other
the quest
people,
for the Holy Grail, whatever that is today.
right. And those of you who are watering this down are really doing disservice. So it's, and even that again is in a way is political, because within the religions, then you have these contests as to which denomination in Christianity is the real Christian denomination, which of the Islam sects is the real Islam, which one really follows the prophet.
I think we'll see more of this going into a presidential election year.
Yeah, probably.
And I think that you had asked about a topic, but that seems to me to segue into what I think is, I don't know if it's just this year. I think this year is just another episode of what seems to me to be a re-establishment of labeling and divisions, so that people seem to be becoming more concerned about identifying themselves as being exactly this. I'm a Hispanic American, or I'm a African American, and
There are no Americans anymore. It doesn't say, right.
and creating divisions that have always been there, but maybe not creating them, but bringing them back up and re-emphasizing divisions and making the politics therefore a lot harder for centrists to deal with, because people on either side say, I don't want to agree with.
Was there a hallmark political event in this country or in the world this past year?
I think for the financial markets, the whole Hong Kong takeover was huge. You cannot underestimate. Clearly, there had been problems there since the start of the year. And if you go back and look at prognostications from the beginning of this year, of '97, everybody felt like South Asia, and Asia in general, was a very, very fine place to be. Economically, we couldn't pick a better spot. And now everybody's, oh my God. But look back on it. It is probably never normal to pay $250,000 in rent, which is what the average expat American pays in rent.
That's what my son pays in New York.
$250,000 is a lot of money by anybody's standards. But you had some issues with currency. Yeah, you had some issues with currency. You had great concern over, will the Chinese stick to the same guns that the British did in running Hong Kong? What happens to the currency? So clearly, for the financial markets, those issues were already out there, but it's funny, investors tend to be either just, there's no middle ground. We're either very, very excited or we're very depressed.
Well, we had this great expansive market that we came into the year, and the big question was, how long will the
bull run,
and the bull sort of petered out a little bit, but and then the whole Asian thing, and I'm assuming this is all interconnected because it always is. But I think that's going to have political ramifications having to do with lots of things: global warming, just the oil.
Well, look what lost the election for Bush. I mean, I really do think, it was the recession tag. So, does Gore have much of a chance? Let's not even talk about campaign finance reform or any of that stuff. I mean, does Gore have a chance if we go into a recession, if we don't get our second soft landing, which the odds of that, it can happen, and it might well happen, but a soft landing would certainly give Gore a better shot.
Certainly.
That's a concern politically, I'm sure.
Yeah. But he'll have, I think, historically he'll have trouble because there just have not been. Bush is the only vice president, the only person out of a former administration able to carry the administration over for a third term. So
people generally ready for a change.
Yeah, and basically within 8 years, that administration has made enough mistakes that we want somebody else. But I think because that ties back into the Hong Kong thing that. As I understand it, the entire Pacific Rim, or at least the eastern part of the Pacific, or I guess western part of the Pacific Rim, is in economic trouble.
Absolutely.
And if, as global as the economy is, how well is the American economy going to withstand the loss of sales to China, to Korea, to Japan, and and
that's the big question right now is our economy is plugging along. We have very nice growth. Try and find some employees in Omaha. You can't do it. And Omaha is not Omaha is not the only city in the country like that. Talk to anyone. Basically everybody's there. So we are sort of a big, slow, giant train just kind of clicking along. Japan is in deep trouble. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has bailed out multiple currencies in Asia. That's a problem, clearly, but the biggest concern is an American investor. I mean, I think as long as you stick with American companies, I don't think we're going to have a huge year in '98. I think, maybe we get a year about like 1994, which was virtually flat. There was almost nothing.
But
how
let's
many
wrap
American
up.
companies don't have any?
Well, that's it.
foreign
The
market?
big multinationals. It's the IBMs. It's the Coca-Colas. It's the Philip Morrises. Because
That had
Asia is their
huge
growth strategy.
projections
Right.
for-
It's their
That's
growth
right.
strategy,
Right.
and nobody wants to separate. It's interesting in the earnings reports coming in. Nobody's identified their Asian earnings. They conglom them all together and they say, okay, here's our international, here's our domestic.
Yeah, they're not
But
splitting
boy,
them out.
you don't know, and I would love to see them, but boy, that's not anything that's public.
Let's wrap up Asia. Deng Xiaoping's passing, which in and of itself probably was not a huge thing because things had moved past him in a sense. But North Korea, the starvation there. I mean, what are Asians and Southeast Asia going to pull? What's all this financial passing of the guard, changing of the guard, going to have impact in the next year to come that we've seen this year?
I'm not so sure it'll have great impact in the next year or two. I think it will long term.
Yeah.
10, 15 years down the line, the visit of the new, Chinese president to the United States, those wonderful pictures of him wearing Disney hats or whatever it was that he was doing.
Reminds me of Khrushchev and his
Yeah,
mom.
that's
Yeah,
right.
it does. On the other hand, I think in long-term goals, if we're looking at that, we're talking about perhaps some shifts in the attitude, or at least the relationship between the United States and China that I think will ultimately be good for both countries. So,
And in terms of market forces, China has certainly embraced capitalism with a
Right.
vengeance. I mean,
Right.
where Russia, they still don't understand why nobody's paying their electric bill. In China, boy, they
Right.
had that figured out well before the turnover. So, I mean, China is still a huge force to be reckoned with. I mean, look, 40% of the world's population there? I mean, you're talking a huge market. It's still there. They are not in probably as much trouble as Japan would be. I would be
Although
more concerned.
Japan, I think they're going to be they're very confident people about the structure of their, but they may have their confidence tested just a little
Already
bit.
are.
They already
Already
are.
are. Bank failures. They
Yeah,
are
that's
seeing.
unheard of.
Unlike, it's not dissimilar to what
recent-
happened with us with the savings and loans a few years back.
Right.
That's what they're
Just
going through
reshaking
now.
it out. and-
Absolutely.
Well, you brought up Russia. Boris says he's coming back to work tomorrow, by the way. Just
Okay.
in case for the latest. It's the latest when I left KFAB. You mentioned how their neighbor, China, their fearsome, awesome neighbor, has got capitalism figured out. What have they got figured out in the last year or so, and what have they yet to really figure out to maintain some stability there? I mean, they're a little worrisome, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think because the possibility of a, in effect, counter-revolution seems to me quite high. And now with, it would not be impossible to think that it would come through democratic processes with the rise of basically a nationalistic leader and seeing the decline of the power of their country. How do you shake it up? Well, you start rattling sabers again. And things
Well,
like
and then
that.
they have almost a classic haves and have-nots
Oh, yeah.
right now, more than they did before, because at least they
Well, the
they appear to
have-nots gotten
accept-
taken care of. Now the have-nots have not.
I mean, they have less than they nodded before. I mean, they can't. The government can't even pay what it's promised to pay, and they can't run these inflated dollars that they were running towards the
Well,
end
the
of
natural
Congress
resource
regime.
states are doing pretty darn well.
Yeah.
But if God forbid, you don't have natural resources, and it's these breakaway republics that may or may not have nuclear weapons. I mean, that's what you worry about, in my opinion. I mean, those are who you worry about, is these disenfranchised army
And
guys that are out
there's
there, and they've got
nuclear
they've got
substances
nukes.
sitting
right.
over there
Right.
Exactly.
that they can't.
And when you can't
have a-
eat, what's moral decision worth? I mean, that's to
That's
me,
true.
that's a real concern. I mean, to me, that out there on the horizon. I mean, Hussein is worrisome, but to me, what could pop up the easiest? I really would almost think that.
What was it? The briefcase bombs that were missing
Yeah.
over there for.
I don't.
Right.
I think you don't even know what all.
I don't even really
yeah, and
wanna
you don't
think
want to
about
know,
it.
probably.
Because
That's
they
right.
got that part of capitalism down.
That's right. They got the sensorial thing is a pretty nice holdover
And their
from
infrastructure
communism.
is still a mess,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
It is.
People starving, people
Yes. Oh, yeah.
not being able to be, heated in the winter. Very.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
I
lot
haven't-
of homeless and
Right. I haven't been into Russia, but last couple of years have been to Hungary and Lithuania twice, pretty close to Russia, and just to get a sense of the problems. You mentioned Russian infrastructure. The whole things are just collapsing. The infrastructure is in terrible shape there. The
It was
economy
tenuous
is dismal.
before, but-
That's right. Now, Hungary, fortunately, has money coming in from the outside Western investment that are making some progress. Lithuania is stalled, making very little progress. One can, get into long conversations about what's happening in Russia because you're so close to the border. And it's really, in many respects, like a frontier environment, such as we had perhaps 100 years ago in this country.
But it's a
And,
former and still sort of superpower. I mean,
is.
the dichotomy there is
That's the
huge.
interesting.
think
There's,
that
there's
is the
no
biggest-
denying their remaining military power, but at the same time, their economic problems are immense.
yeah. I
So-
think of Germany after World War I, where just a tremendous loss of power, a tremendous loss of faith, but at the same time a tremendous pride and feeling of nationalism, and
Yeah.
that can be very dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you see in this sort of demise of Boris Yeltsin, I mean, he's been politically kind of falling downhill, but now he's physically, we've seen another bout of his, whatever it is he has. I mean,
Charisma.
it depends
Yeah.
on the day. But I mean, this is given some body or bodies time to pool their power bases, but I maybe I'm just not in the loop. I'm not, I mean, it must be going on over there.
Absolutely.
I think it is, but I'm not aware of any heir apparent that stands
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, I mean,
at this
they-
point.
That's-
And,
Of course, that's not unusual for Soviet politics, and so the political culture isn't going to change overnight. So I wouldn't be surprised, but there are the inside guys jockeying for positions, similarly to what happened when Stalin died. That, very surprising things happen under those circumstances.
Well, there's stuff going on, I'm sure. We just,
I can almost guarantee
I'm going to throw
that.
3 things together real fast that may seem like they shouldn't be, and maybe they shouldn't. But we're running out of time. And fast track failure this year, the global warming treaty, and our job situation. And every time they talk about fast track and global warming, the unions get up in arms, and then yet people say it's better for our economy to be able to have, this trade, and then forget the global warming concessions because that's bad for our jobs and our trade. And then you have the issue that we can't do everything we want here
Right.
because we don't have the bodies.
Yeah, it's a blessing to have. I mean, when you're at full employment, what a nice problem. I can remember when I graduated from college.
Without
there were probably-
inflation, that's
Well, amazing.
amazing.
That's the
It's
thing. I mean,
amazing.
Greenspan has just done the most beautiful High Wire Act you will ever have seen. Has kept monetary policy almost as perfectly poised as it could possibly be to get the kind of economic growth we've had, without the inherent inflation value there is really unprecedented. I mean, they really have figured that out, and Greenspan was
Yeah, and
just
not
reappointed.
having the
Keynes says it's
salaries go
impossible.
up
Yeah, that's
a lot.
right. Yeah, Keynesian economists.
The salaries have stayed pretty stable, even though there is a great demand for the employees, and they could be demanding,
Right.
higher
because
salaries.
there's great price resistance for
Yeah.
one thing. Try and get any American product. There is not, what we worry about in many of our core industries we follow is not price inflation, it's price deflation. That in fact, not only can you not charge, look at computers.
Yeah.
They're better, faster, cheaper. I bought one 2 years ago. Guess what? I'm going to buy.
I don't
another
even.
one.
Let's not even talk about
Yeah,
it.
and that's
Please,
the
it's
kind
so
of thing,
depressing. You walk out the door.
Those workers aren't
obsolete.
making less money, Carol. I mean, clearly
I know.
they need to make more money, and especially in a high-tech business. But because we've got these market forces pushing them down, and the technologies there, we're building super chips better, cheaper, faster. We've actually got price deflation, and that has to come out somewhere.
Well, are we having wage deflation? I mean, we read about all these super bonuses that the CEOs are getting, and then we see, and it's kept, companies keeping a profit margin. The cost of living increases aren't there. The unions haven't been getting the kinds of concessions they want. That's why the UPS thing was such a big whoop
phenomenal.
this year.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing that in some industries because the demand is so strong. And again, in high tech, that sort of thing, that you'd see that the wages going up. But otherwise, the average Joe on the street, no, his bottom line is not
Sure.
improving so much.
Because labor is still run by market forces, and the people who are doing the best are the people who are in the shortest supply.
That's exactly right.
And I think that's important, getting back in the sense of the educational system, and that we need to make that adjustment. I think those who are falling behind are those who aren't ready for this new market. They
Right.
are trained technically to have a place in this market. And although those who are doing wonderfully, we have to think in educational terms how we prepare this new group, largely younger people coming into the field.
Right. And I think another is what do we do about those people who simply are not going to be able to get the kinds of skills that are going to be most marketable?
That's
can
scary.
we really just let them behind? And there just aren't enough. Well, there are.
And then we
and
want all the
apparently-
welfare mothers off
Right.
welfare,
Off
but
Today,
they have no
yeah,
skills.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yesterday,
That's
Pop.
right. Right.
We've run out
They
of
shouldn't have
time.
gotten on in the first place.
We have run out of time. We could go on and on. It's a little mind candy here, but some serious thought too. Professor Brian LeBeau of Creighton, Professor James Johnson of UNO, and Holly Murphy Barstow of Norwest Financial Services, Investment Services.
The Norwest Investments, absolutely.
Oh, so much, so little time. We run out of time. Have a great holiday season and a happy new year.
Thank you.